Queen Mary in Long Beach is indeed a special place to visit. There's so much history from an era long gone. The Queen Mary represents a time of glamour, simple pleasures. She was a mode of transportation and a world unto her own. Somewhat detached from the world around her, a crossing on Queen Mary was an experience the wealthy adored and the average person craved. Come aboard with me, your host of Cruising Authority, as we explore what makes the Queen Mary such a special place. On the previous two shows I produced about our visit to the Queen Mary this past February of 2010, I showed you the bridge where all the commands to drive the ship across the Atlantic were made. I took you to the bow and showed you the huge anchor chains. I talked about the ship's funnels and explained a little about the expansion joints and the ship's structural design. I even had a little time to relax in a deck chair. There's so much to see on the Queen Mary, from her shopping arcade and the observation bar to her powerful engines. You can even see the ship's last remaining propeller. I know I'm getting personal here, but to me, the Queen Mary is such a special place. And for me, it all started when my dad took our family to Southern California in 1977, and we stayed at the Queen Mary Hotel. It was such a thrill for me to take my son to the Queen Mary here recently. I took some pictures of my son in the same spots I was during my first visit to the ship in 1977. Here's me going up the stairs on deck exploring the ship, and here is my son in the same spot. Next, my dad took a picture of me trying to lift the anchor chain in 1977. And here's my son trying to do the same thing in 2010. Finally, on a later visit, when I was a little older, my dad took a picture of me sitting on the spare anchor, and here is my son doing the same thing. When you think about it, my story and my personal experiences with the Queen Mary only span a time frame of about 30 years, when in fact the Queen Mary has been around for about 75 years. Queen Mary was in service crossing the Atlantic for about 30 years. However, she's been a landmark in Long Beach now for about 40 years. So just imagine the memories this ship has provided and the millions of people like me who also have a unique story to tell about their visits or time spent on the Queen Mary. While I was on the Queen Mary, I met up with Will Kane, who is the honorary captain of the Queen Mary, and I asked him about all of these ghost stories we keep hearing about. Now tell us how much is really true, factual about these ghost stories.
We get reports all the time from people who claim to be experiencing something paranormally aboard the ship. I will say one thing: we don't have ghosts aboard the ship, but we seem to have a lot of angels.
Oh, well, that's a good way to put it. Well, now, I personally, I'm a little hesitant to concede to the Queen Mary having ghosts or hauntings or anything like that, but I think it's mostly a PR thing, don't you think?
I will say that when you stop to think about the amount of human energy that has passed through the hull of the ship in 73 years, that's bound to leave some kind of residue in the environment. And I think that's what people feel when they come here. It's an emotional experience.
There's a lot of history on this ship. Like, for example, we are staying currently in a stateroom that Eisenhower stayed in, I believe.
Yes. President Eisenhower traveled in the 50s aboard the ship.
One thing I wanted to point out was the Queen Mary was filled with an Art Deco decor. This is an example of that Art Deco. This light stanchion here, we're still in the first class lounge, and throughout the whole ship, there are fantastic examples of Art Deco design and decor, and it just really brought out an endearing quality throughout the ship. If you remember from my first video, I talked about the ship's funnels and mentioned that the middle funnel once held one of the Queen Mary's 3 whistles, and that whistle was refurbished and placed aboard the Queen Mary 2. Well, I decided to let you hear both whistles side by side. First, here's the Queen Mary's whistles on the forward funnel. Now, here's the refurbished whistle, which is on the funnel of the Queen Mary 2. The last captain of the Queen Mary, John Treasure Jones, once said he felt the Queen Mary was like a living thing with a soul. I asked Commodore Warwick, who was the captain of the Queen Mary 2 at the time, what his thoughts were on a ship having a soul. And here's what he had to say.
It's difficult to define actually what a soul is on a ship, but I think it's a combination of things. Most of the people that work on the QE2 and have worked there for a number of years have a very, very strong affinity with that ship, and I think it's the extension of the affinity that gives the vessel a soul.
Listen, not everyone is going to understand how unique and how special this ship sitting in Long Beach is, and how truly fortunate we are today to be able to still walk the decks of the Queen Mary. Not everyone is going to have the giddy experiences like me when I visit the Queen Mary. However, because of her increasingly remote past, to many, she's just an old ship. I hope you'll go see the Queen Mary for yourself. Walk her decks, visit her museum, stay in an original stateroom for a few nights, and absorb what essence remains of this once grand city at sea. Part of what is so intriguing to me about the Queen Mary is her stately size and power and grace, which you can still see in her bow. And for those who truly take my advice to heart, the mystique of the Queen Mary is still alive in another ship called the Queen Mary 2, where you can still experience the magic of an Atlantic crossing on a grand ship. I had a chance to experience firsthand a voyage aboard the Queen Mary 2 when she first came out in 2003, and it was a dream come true to be able to walk the decks of a ship bearing the name Queen Mary.
Just went on the Queen Mary 2. Kind of a dream come true for me, and I know you had a good time as well.
I did. It was a wonderful cruise.
I went as a member of the press, and so we were treated royally on the Queen Mary 2. We ate in the Queen's Grill, which is the finest dining anywhere on the oceans. So out of all the cruise industry, the Queen's Grill is the top of the line. The only thing we didn't get to do is dance.
That's right, but that was all right. I was okay with that.
Go see the Queen Mary in Long Beach. If you depart out of the cruise terminal just aft of the Queen Mary, you'll get a good look at the old lady. So be sure to take a walk around, book a few nights, and stay in one of her original staterooms. And of course, for those who want to experience the full package, the real deal, book passage aboard the Queen Mary 2. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching a special edition of Cruising Authority at cruisetalkshow.com, and I'm your host, Barry Vaudrin. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to get in touch with a cruise expert, drop me an email at cruisetalkshow@aol.com, and I'll be sure to point you in the right direction and get you in touch with a cruise broker who specializes in getting the best possible rates out there. Until next time, I want to wish you smooth seas. What a wonderful weekend we had in Southern California aboard the Queen Mary in Long Beach. Well, we're going home now, and we're flying from Los Angeles back to Minneapolis aboard an AirTran flight. Listen, I have some advice for you. the next time you want to fly to where it's warm, like Southern California, Florida, or as far south as Aruba, be sure to book your passage on AirTran, because they'll save you a lot of money the next time you want to fly.